Well, thank you, Michael. It's a privilege for me to be on your show. In discussing the what I call the State of the Union, and if we look at it from that standpoint, we have to look at the republic. We have to look at our government and how they're functioning now, and in many cases not functioning. We have to look at a government that continues to legislate rather than delegislate, regulate rather than deregulate. And the study that we've done in Stand Up America over the last 2 years that we have finished up reflects that 47% of the federal government, Michael, could be done away with and we wouldn't miss it. But with the lack of leadership in not only the executive branch but throughout the Congress, we basically at this point in time have a broken government. So the question is, what are we going to do about it as American citizens? Are we going to wait and let the natural the status of voting turn everything around, wait for the votes to come in 2014 and 2016? Or do we continue to go down each day as we watch the news and as things seem to get worse? So what we're looking at is a no confidence vote legislation in Congress now, because we know impeachment won't work because of partisan politics. So what we're looking at, Michael, are alternatives, how to change our government, take control of it, and put some mature common sense leadership there in Washington.
Now, when we talk about a no confidence vote, we don't have a process for that. That's typically something we hear about as a parliamentary rule in Merry England across the pond. How would we develop something like that here? Because there's no constitutional authority for it, and I would gander that it's probably going to be a difficult sell to the people in Congress because of the political division.
Well, no, that's a great point, and that's where even in the Constitution, our forefathers really probably, and even in their own minds, couldn't conceive of an American government that completely breaks up and is dysfunctional, corrupt, and inept. And so with the impeachment in there and the partisan politics, it's not going to work in 2014 and in the future. But in private life, in corporations, businesses, if the leadership is not working, you can't let it continue, or else the business goes under, just like our country is right now. It's $18 trillion in debt, no friends in the world, nobody trusts us. Congress that can't get anything done. We haven't had a diplomatic victory since the wall went down from our State Department since the early 90s. And so when we look at a totally broken federal government, what do? Well, we got to stand up as citizens and Americans and say, okay, if you're not going to impeach the parties, then you've got to have a resolution in Congress that we do something like a no confidence vote and put that into our laws. So with that in mind, or we can wait around and hopefully put other leaders in, elect them again, but I'm not confident we have the mature common sense leaders that are going to run for office anymore. I'm not confident in the ones we have now that they're proposing out there.
Well, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because it almost seems like those people that would be qualified to run for office and have the right level of integrity and honor and interest in doing the job for the right reason, they're frightened away from it, because they look at Congress now and they say, why would I possibly want to jump into that viper's pit?
Well, that's exactly right. But we do have people, if the conditions were right, they would run. We have many corporate leaders. We have retired senior generals and admirals that have all the training as far as national security, running multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar budgets, have been through all the schools that certainly are born and matured leaders. We don't have that in the people that are running for Congress. I mean, I can name a few that I like Senator Cruz. He's got a lot of possibility. He's got a lot of common sense. He's educated, but put together a partner with him that knows national security, because the two key issues right now are national security, protecting America from the threats external to America, our borders, the threat from Iran, for example, the threats coming from radical Islam. So when you look at the external threats, then we look at the internal threats, and that's basically a collapse of our government, a collapse of the financial system. So those threats you have to examine and say, well, what are we going to do about it? The Egyptians did something about it. 33 million people stood up, a no confidence vote in Morsi, and said, we are not going to tolerate the Muslim Brotherhood. Thank God they had the Egyptian army came in, prevented a civil unrest, put in an interim government, are now building a new constitution, and they'll have new elections this year.
Well, one of my
So the format is there. The only other alternative, if things continue to get worse, we could have a revolution in this country.
Well, and I believe that at this point we're seeing the real possibility of that beginning to emerge. I mean, I believe that there is enough unrest at this point, and quite frankly, were there to be some sort of a natural disaster or some kind of a catastrophic terrorist attack or something that would be the inciting, the catalyst, if you will, that would light that powder keg, I could easily see that occurring. Financial collapse is at this point almost a question of imminent. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when at this stage.
That's right.
So the concern I think I have with the no confidence issue, and perhaps you can alleviate this for me and my listenership, is if there's no provision for it in Congress now, are you speaking with Congress people at this point, both senators and House Representatives members, who have stood behind the idea and are promoting it actively as a resolution?
The resolution has 50-some articles in it. We're in the final draft stage of the resolution of no confidence that we will submit probably within the next week to 10 days to members of Congress. But we're trying to fill a void that's not there. We're trying to prevent a bloody revolution in this country. So someone's got to do something to correct the course that we're on. If we were the captain of a ship, if we look at, we have to be captains of our soul. We have to be masters of our destiny. And to do that, that means that we have to stand up and we're going to say enough is enough, Washington. Either leave. The other alternative that we've been pushing too, of course, is for a step down, a resignation, and we've asked for the resignation of Obama, Biden, Pelosi, Reid, Boehner, as well as McConnell.
Right.
And so, Nixon stepped down because of a forced resignation. So these are things that can be done, but the people have got to stand up, and we're finding a growing number of people around the country, veterans, organizations, even the younger people now when they look at this Obamacare. So what we see is a fueling of passion now, that realization that we must change this government. And it can't continue like this, or we are going to crush and fold just like Rome, just like the Roman Empire fell. There's a lot of comparisons to that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think we have the 400 years it took for the Roman Empire to slide into decay. Ours is going to come a little bit more abruptly, I suspect.
Well, and they say if something happens in the international and financial markets, they call the paper that the Chinese are holding the continued devaluation of the dollar. And if we have some kind of an attack, EMP, electronic magnetic pulse attack from Iran,
right,
take down our grid system and our computers, and that's what they're planning, by the way. We do have good intelligence on that. Our markets will go down in 72 hours. Look what happened on 9/11.
Right.
And that means goods stop functioning. They stop working. The flow of trades and services and goods halt. So it doesn't take long in this modern age for a government to fall apart fairly quickly.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that there are some other proposals I've heard out there, including the Article 5 convention type approach, where you look at constitutional amendments. I think, and I like the concept of it. I think we're a little short on time.
We are.
The constitutional amendment path is one that's rather lengthy, and it's fraught with unseen or unforeseen road bumps, including the fact that we may never quite get enough states to agree upon what those amendments ought to be.
Well, that's right.
So, and even afterwards, I mean, those amendments can take years to approve. Another approach is a massive protest by Americans, similar to what was done in Egypt. I know that you've probably heard of Colonel Riley's approach with that.
The American Spring.
The American Spring, and of course, the problem with that, it would appear, is that we don't have a critical mass of people who are willing to sacrifice the time and the effort and the money and the energy necessary to go out there. It's like, 50% of America seems to be either on apathy pills or
Yeah.
or on the dole, or
Clueless.
both or clueless. And so that leaves, what, 20 or 25% of us that are actually interested enough to do something. How do we?
It only takes 1 to 2% or 5% of a population to change it historically. And if you look at past revolutions, they've always been created by overtaxation, like Rome was. You have a tyrannical government. You have the people that are downtrodden. So a lot of people in the United States say, "Well, that can't happen in America." But I'm telling you, it can happen in America.
Oh yeah.
And it could get very bloody. I think Colonel Riley, the American Spring, is probably going to be a great success, because I think it'll not only be in Washington, but it'll also be in the state capitals.
Right.
And a lot of people are very serious about arresting the people in Washington, what they call a citizen's arrest. The question is, will the military stand by the government, or they stand by the people? We know inside the government now they're doing surveys, and they're asking some of our soldiers to sign off on a document in regards to firing on the American people in case there is an uprising. So we know that's happening in Homeland Security. I talked to a young lieutenant from Tennessee yesterday, and he was at Fort Campbell, and they were going to make him sign that document. And he said, "No, I'm not going to do it, because the Constitution, the American people come first." And so he's back now. He's with the National Guard, because the National Guard's a state asset, and he doesn't have to sign that document. But that's the purge. That's the types of things that are going on in our military, by the way, and the morale's very bad. The highest rate of suicides, 349 suicides last year in the military.
It's amazing. The suicide rate is almost as high as the death rate from Afghanistan and Iraq. I mean,
it's horrible.
It's unbelievable. It's interesting that you brought up that issue of the National Guard, because I'm in Missouri, and yesterday our governor gave out an executive order that he's going to now incorporate our National Guard into drug enforcement activity within the state. And major cities are signing memorandums of understanding to utilize our National Guard for drug enforcement in the state of Missouri. Now, to me, that is about as tyrannical a move as you can look at from a state governor. When you're talking about involving the National Guard in drug enforcement, where we don't I think every community has a drug problem, but to utilize the National Guard and employ them in cities and counties and communities around the state, I think that is a very, very dangerous move.
Well, it is, and you see the executive powers that Obama is using, continually bypassing Congress. You have a very weak Supreme Court that can't seem to stand up as the third branch of government and to uphold the Constitution. So again, I said we're broken in Congress and the legislative branch. We're broken entirely in the executive branch, from the IRS to the Department of Justice to the Defense Department now, where we don't have generals and admirals standing up and saying enough is enough. Homeland Security, I mean, it's a totally ineffective federal government. And by the way, Michael, I just got back. I was with General Sisi 2 months ago in Egypt. I've had 4 trips into the Middle East. And General Sisi, he proposed to me his vision. But what he was saying is, why does America always look at the Middle East through their own eyes? Why can't they come over here and look at what's going on with Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood and look through our eyes? Because we had the State Department and Obama supporting the Muslim Brotherhood against a democratic movement to change the government over there from the Muslim Brotherhood.
Well, that whole issue of the Muslim Brotherhood and our support for the Muslim Brotherhood and in this regard is disturbing, in the sense that you have to wonder what is the real motivation there, because it's almost as if there's a desire to misuse or to support something which the vast majority of America would definitely not be for or be willing to promote. It's almost as if this administration is aiding and abetting them.
They are. There's no doubt about that. They've had them in the White House. We have the names. If you saw General McInerney's report last week on the infiltration of the Muslim Brotherhood, into our own government. You can Google it. He did an excellent interview last week on that. But certainly Claire Lopez, who you should have on sometime, she'll completely go over that profile of what's happening with our own government. And by the way, under the Bush administration, he's the one that initiated the Muslim outreach program.
Yeah.
And when they started infiltrating officers of Jihadi background or Islamic background into the senior offices of the Pentagon. So it's been going on for quite a while, but at this point in time, you have a sympathetic Valerie Jarrett. You have a very sympathetic president of the Muslim Brotherhood. We have a CIA head who is a Muslim. And I'm not castigating this all across Muslims because I have Muslim friends.
Sure.
Many of them don't even go to the mosque. They're not radicals. But certainly when you see Saudi Arabia that doesn't want to have anything to do with us now, and they want to destroy Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood. And then Egypt, and then you have now the chessboard up there in Syria where you have the Russians supporting Assad, Iran supporting Assad and Hezbollah. The Saudis are against Iran. And we're a non-player over there at this point in time.
You know, I cannot fathom what is our motivation for not looking at the Muslim threat in its real true sense. In other words, pretending as if it's really not there and making the agreement that has come out with Iran, we're the laughing stock with the post
absolutely.
being put out yesterday by Iran and basically stating that we've capitulated and we're on our knees before the Muslim world. I mean, it's, you know, this was not something that we could have envisioned 10 years ago in our future.
Well, they're amateurs. You got Putin as a professional. Obama is an amateur, and there's a book out by that, by the way. Kerry's an amateur. He's over there with Rouhani. They're laughing at us, and like you said, Rouhani came out yesterday, and he said, we won.
Yeah.
The West has surrendered.
It's amazing.
Peace in our time, like Chamberlain. But they're laughing at us because we're a bunch of amateurs with an agenda.
It's amazing to me. I almost wonder whether it's ineptitude or willful intent.
It's both. It's absolutely both. It's an agenda that's run by the Obama clan, the ideology. At the same time, then you wrap that around ineptous and incompetent people like Sebelius, Homeland Security. The incompetence that we have in the IRS, just look at the testimonies of these people.
Yeah.
I mean, you sit there and laugh that if they were in your company, they would be gone by 5 o'clock this afternoon.
My
you wouldn't
goodness.
tolerate that. So that's what I'm saying. The American people, we don't need to tolerate it either. Let's do something about it.
Right. Your no confidence proposal is one which I think has merit in the sense that if we can get the resolution passed and we can get Congress to actually hold it. I'm very concerned about the partisanship associated with that and people wanting to or not wanting to take a stand against their party alliances and so forth. And quite frankly, it's as if the Republican Party and the Democrat Party have, for all intents and purposes, merged at this point anyway.
Oh, absolutely. There's not much difference. Thank goodness we've got some good young people in Congress and the Senate now that are trying to change things, but yet you got the Karl Roves and what we call the Bushies. They want all of these Republicans in the Tea Party or Tea Partiers out. They don't want to include them, and the Republican Party basically is neutered at this time because of the likes of a Karl Rove and others that are advising some of the senior people.
Yeah, I mean, it's well, and in addition to that, it appears as if they are all on the inside know that something is about to tip the scales here, and they are no longer even pretending to represent us any longer. The level of when we look at this immigration issue and the GOP talking about how to shoehorn amnesty in when, for all intents and purposes, the vast majority of America has already said that that's not a good idea. You have to question their motives. It's almost as if when you look at the NSA surveillance issues, it's my personal belief that those people who would have stood up have been compromised. Yeah.
Well, and the arrogance of them, they're so arrogant today. I met with some of our CIA people in Istanbul a few months ago, and I can tell you their arrogance of the operators out there and their lack of competence. I went inside Syria in November. I was inside. I went to Aleppo. I had 400 armed members of the Free Syrian Army with me. And I vetted everything for the government over there. But they don't listen. If you're not on the inside, they don't want to listen to you. And they have their own agenda. More and more is going to come out on Benghazi. You may know we formed the Citizens Commission on Benghazi. And we're the ones that sent the legislative suggestion to Boehner last week that he form a select committee so we can call all these people in on a subpoena, because Daryl Issa and the 5 committees that have jurisdiction over certain areas are not doing the job. They get to the 20-yard line, Michael, if I compare it to football, but they can never get in the end zone.
Right.
Fast and furious, never in the end zone. What's happened? Who's accountable? IRS, Homeland Security.
It's almost disturbing in the sense that you got to wonder whether or not this is, the plan of what they're trying to accomplish here is almost willful intent to not be effective, essentially.
It's effective to change America forever. That's their agenda. Let's not forget what Obama said. That's what they're doing. Change America forever. And we're going to say, no, you're not going to do that. That's why the American people have to stand up.
Well, and to that end, I mean, in the sense of what the American Spring is, if you have not gotten your resolution passed by April, will you be willing to support that effort?
Well, I've told Colonel Riley, and I've said that's his deal. I'm not part of it, but I told many on some interviews that I've done already that I'm for the American people standing up. It's a national call to action. And if it takes people walking to Washington, D.C., or coming in on buses, horseback, ATVs, whatever, and in the state capitals to get their attention that we're serious as citizens and we have that right as citizens to stand up, then that's what we should do. And if Colonel Riley is successful of garnering enough force to go back there, spend the time, and demand resignations, demand arrest of these people who are violating the American Constitution and law, then that's what has to be done. And I'm afraid that's what's going to happen this spring, and we'll see what happens.
I'd written an article that was very similar to what Colonel Riley has promoted, and I basically had called for a massive, peaceful, civil, disobedient resistance back in April of 2011. And that particular story has garnered, I don't know, about 100,000 views. And it's now actually come full circle to the point where it's actually happening at this stage in the game. But it's so apparent at this stage in the game that we've got to take action that is going to completely change the landscape, because I really don't believe that there are political solutions that are going to be, resolvable via 2014 elections, nor even Article 5 type, conventions and things like that. I agree. I mean, I think at this point we've really got to get a coalition of Americans together. What, in your opinion, would be the target number for people to be able to make an impact such that the national news media, which is clearly biased, would not be able to ignore?
I think it's got to be 5 to 10 million people around the country. That's all. Okay. I think 5 to 10 million people, and the right coverage and the right speakers, the right leadership to guide it. I'm looking for George Washington to ride across the Potomac now rather than the Delaware. And, by God, we'll have a white horse for somebody, whoever's that George Washington, but that's what we need. And, I can tell by talking to a lot of people in the Tea Parties, a lot of organizations, they want someone to lead the effort to change this government back to where it's abiding by the Constitution, a government that has values, leadership that will strip down this massive bureaucracy that we have that is just costing billions and billions of dollars, and it doesn't get any better.
Right.
So as Dan Hefnefer from the Wall Street Journal said in an article a couple of weeks ago, we need some big league presidents. We need some big league leadership. Right. And he's right. We don't have that. We have minor leagues. If you look at some of these guys are putting up to be president, they're okay maybe as serving governors or congressmen, But we need somebody other than a congressman and a senator and a politician. We need a true leader like George Washington. He was a military guy that came out of retirement as a colonel. He was Colonel Washington.
May I submit, sir, that you may look good in a powdered wig?
Yeah, like my hair's going now, you're probably right. I love white horses, too. That's the state. That's the State of the Union.
I understand. Well, I appreciate very much you taking the time to join with us today. I support your no confidence measure. I think that that's something that our group can certainly get behind, and we should push for that and try to drive that home to our representatives as much as they'll listen to us, which doesn't appear to be very much these days. But certainly we will support that. Would you just touch briefly before we go on your American Provisional Leadership Council?
Well, this was brought up to me again. I'm speaking in Myrtle Beach this weekend at the big kickoff of the Tea Party event down there. I'll be speaking in Texas. I'll be speaking in California to the Tea Parties there. But basically, it was suggested that somehow somebody put some leadership to bring the Tea Parties together. So they're looking again for a George Washington to do that. But the American Provisional Leadership Council was suggested to me that I form that with 10 or 12 of the most common sense men and women of wisdom that we have in the country, from the private sector as well as some senior retired military such as Admiral Lyons or General McInerney or General Boykin, and that we really meet probably every couple weeks, and we'll come up with what we think the government needs to do, give them a little direction, be sort of like a board of directors for our own government, because they can't seem to do it themselves.
Right.
So that was the whole thing, and it's not a bad idea, and we could probably get a lot of support that say, hey, we're going to meet, and okay, here they have the Affordable Care Act. Here's what you guys in Congress need to do. Here's what you need to do about the budget. Here's what you need to do about Iran, and get out there and represent the American people, because unfortunately, the vast majority of these legislators in Washington are taking care of themselves and worried about the next election, and they don't listen to us. So it's just another way of coming up with peaceful ways of doing things, Michael.
May I suggest that a secondary phase to that may be to look towards, in the event that we're not successful in cleaning up the act of those who are currently in power, that under the event of an American Spring success, one of the problems that we'd have is essentially what Egypt has had, which is a void of leadership, and we don't have a provisional government prepared to step in. Now, in our case,
we do. In a way, there are people out there that are looking at that, by the way.
Well, I mean, what we should have is folks that are representing each given area that are an exact duplicate of our existing Congress, who are pre-qualified and pre-vetted, right, and have already signed an agreement similar to the pact that I had proposed, which basically states that you have accountability partners, and in the event that you violate the terms of your contract with your electorate, they already have your pre-executed resignation letter in hand. Mm-hmm. And all they have to do is date it and submit it to the press, and you are no recalls, none of that necessary. So the idea being that if you've got a provisional government pre-prepared, in the event that either there was an American Spring success or some other issue, including a national emergency or a terrorist attack, that there would be a group prepared to step in, because, as you well know, politics, like nature, abhors a vacuum.
Yep, that's exactly right. Well, I can tell you, with the people that I network with, I can put together a provisional government in 24 hours, which could take charge. They're out there, believe me.
Is there a constitutional authority for that?
No, there's not. Unfortunately, there's not. I mean, there's things going around, Michael, like setting aside the Constitution for 6 months and putting in a government in power that then can make the changes necessary to get back on track with new elections and any revisions that are needed in the Constitution. But those are the things that are going out around the country. And a lot of people don't even realize that. So there's a lot of people. I mean, look at ammunition sales. I mean, people buying up guns. Obama's been the best guy we've had for guns and ammunition.
You ought to get a trophy for the best gun salesman in history.
That's right. So, I mean, there's a lot going on. But if you're living in the big urban areas, you're living in L.A. or you're living in New York, you're basically have no clue what's going on out in the hinterlands.
Right, right, and that is
So,
absolutely the truth. Well,
yeah.
General, thank you very, very much for joining with us today. I'm very grateful that you spent the time with us, and I very much appreciate it. I'd love to have you back if I can impose upon you at a later date as we move further along and your no confidence vote begins to move forward. I'd love to have you back.
Thank you, Michael. We'll be happy to do it.
Thank you so very much, sir.
Okay.
Have a great day.
Bye.